Again, this is a Prophecy on Israel National Radio, Ruth Sheva. The show is simulcasted as Messiah Hour on YouTube, and you can email me at messiahhour@gmail.com. Again, our guest this afternoon is Dr. Gerald Schroeder, who is not just a world-renowned author, world-renowned lecturer. I want to talk about the lecture part of your profession because you lecture all over the world, and I'm curious, who's in the audience? Is it religious people, semi-religious people, atheists? Because this is a topic. It's a phenomenon right now of the combination of science and religion working together, proving each other. And I want to know the people interested in this topic, what do they generally look like demographically?
Boy, Jews and Christians. A lot of evangelicals. They love it. I mean, I'm serious. I'm absolutely serious. We just came back. We had an extraordinary, Barbara and I, my wife's Barbara Sofer. She's a great writer.
Sure, absolutely.
BarbaraSofer.com. I give her a plug. She's really good.
Got to do it. Shalom bias. Got to give a plug to your wife, no doubt.
Yeah, right. She writes about the human spirit in the Jerusalem Post. In any event, we just came back and we gave a whole series of lectures, and they were partly in among Jews, and they were partly among Christians, partly among Jews and partly among Christians. And the persons in the audience are mixed. I mean, I had one person at the end of a lecture. This was in California, in Agoura, and the person stood up. I've been talking about the ancient, I just mentioned names like Rashi, and suddenly the person says, but who is this person Rashi that you're talking about? Now you can imagine, that shows the level that people come. I mean, people come that know this stuff inside out. People come that have never even heard the name Rashi, or maybe read the Bible. So it's a mix. But so it's not just bursting through an open door. I've had some amazing, responses. The nicest compliment I ever had. I was working out of a talk in Canada a few years ago. It was high school students. Usually they're older people. This is high school, 10th grade through 12th grade. And I didn't look back, but I heard one girl saying to another, I just tell from their voices, one girl saying to another, finally it all makes sense. That's just, I cannot tell you a more beautiful thing that I've heard, from the outside. Finally it all makes sense. People are struggling to try, even if you can be an Orthodox Jew that's a doubter. I had a friend that said he keeps every law in the book that he knows of, but he's not really sure. At least he used to not be sure. So it's a range from people that have never heard any of these commentators' names to persons who are complete enthusiasts. I don't know if I get really any strong atheists. I had one who happened to turn out to be the most famous philosopher atheist, Anthony Flew.
Right.
I'm not in the philosophy, so I'm thankful I didn't know his stature in the world prior to having this discussion with him. But it's on audio. It's on video. I say it's DVD, with nice graphics, actually. And we talked for 2.5 days. And when he came out and said that he now realizes there's a God in this world, it was listed in the news service as one of the 5 most important events of the day. I mean, I always say, Africa's burning alive, and Anthony Flew becoming a believer was one of the 5 most important events of the day. And it was pretty extraordinary, actually. Here's a person just on the scientific understanding, but he said, I follow the school of Socrates. I go to where the truth leads me. And he saw the truth that you couldn't get from there to here without a tinkerer in the system, a God in the system.
Wow.
So
incredible.
So that's the range. And I've had people, persons came up, and I've had a lot of people say, I won't mention numbers, but there's large numbers that have said I changed their lives.
That's amazing.
One of my fossils that I had was given me from a person from NASA, and he said I'm a devout Christian, and all my life I've had this problem. I like to go to church on Sundays, but I got this 6 days, and I work in NASA. We got billions of light years around here, and so you changed my life tonight. He actually gave me a fossil from 500 million years ago.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the time. Now, I know you've given this lecture thousands of times and wrote about your book, so obviously I know this. It might seem rote, or probably knowing you're very excited about this, but the concept of you have the 6 days of creation, but the time is relative, going on Einstein's theory of relativity. If you just briefly talk a bit about how that all works with Bereshit, because people reading the beginning part of the Torah might say, well, how could the world be created in 6 days? That just doesn't make sense. So can you just talk briefly a bit about how that does make sense, not just according to Torah, but according to science?
Okay, and using only ancient commentary and modern science. It's based largely on the Ramban Nachmanides, his insights. There are two descriptions of time in the Torah. From Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, up to Adam, the time is, it's a bad translation, I'll just use the English. There was evening and morning, day one, evening and morning, a second. Each day goes by, for those that don't realize, Genesis chapter 1, the creation chapter is broken into 6 days. Okay. And each day the sentence repeats itself. There's evening and morning, day one, Yom Echad, evening and morning, the second day, Yom Sheni, third day, fourth day, fifth day, the sixth day. And then that description of time ends, and the calendar with numbers doesn't begin again till chapter 5. Adam and Eve lived 130 years, have a kid named Seth. Seth lives 105 years, a kid named Enosh. Enosh lives... From Adam forward, every passage of time is human-based and earth-based. Adam and Eve lived on the earth, they had a kid named Seth. Seth lived on the earth, had a kid named Enosh, etc. But up to Adam, it's this bizarre way of describing time, evening and morning, day one, evening and morning, second day. So there are two calendars in the text, two separate calendars, one leading up to Adam, with its description of time, and one from Adam forward. So here comes the key that was pointed out to me by Nachmanides, who doesn't claim it for himself either. He asked, why does the form of the number change? Why isn't it written this evening and morning a first day? It says second day, third day, fourth day. Why doesn't it say there's a first day? And the answer he gives is very interesting. It's not like Rashi. We all know that Rashi, that there's one God, etc. The Talmud is trying to, the Kabbalah is trying to understand the age of the universe. He writes, the reason that the Torah says there's evening and morning, day one, and not evening and morning, a first day, is because you cannot write first if there's not yet a second. We all see that with the two world wars. No one called the First World War the First World War during the First World War. It was the Great War, the war to end all wars. But by the next war, the Second World War, that Great War became the First World War. Unfortunately, we have this now in Israel. Again, I fought in the First Lebanese War. I can guarantee you, every one of us that was fighting in the First Lebanese War never called it the First Lebanese War. Not one of us. But then came the second one, and suddenly that war that I fought in became the First Lebanese War. So we see that the fact that the Torah says day one means that the Torah must be seeing time from a time before there was a second day. So if the viewpoint of the Torah for the 6 days of Genesis was from Sinai, well, there had been hundreds of thousands of other days by the time they get to Sinai, and it could have written there was a first day. The viewpoint of the Torah cannot be from Sinai looking back. It has to be from the beginning looking forward. I didn't figure it out. Nachmanides leads right to it. The Torah sees time from the beginning looking forward. Now, this is not relativity, actually. It's all astronomy. What it turns out is when you view an event in this magnificent universe of ours, and that event occurs far, far away from you, you're like you're watching in a telescope or something, but you don't see it live time, that information has to travel to you through space. Our universe is expanding. So that means as that information travels you through space, it's distorted by the stretching of space. And if it's billions of years of light years away from us, it takes billions of years to reach you. And in that time, the universe stretches quite a bit. And so the information is distorted. It's actually stretched out. If I want to go back to make a calculation of what that information I get here from that distant galaxy, we'll say, what it was like when it happened, I have to go back in time, mathematically, of course, not physically, mathematically, to the moment that information left the galaxy and to correct for how much the universe stretched. In other words, as I go back in time, the information is squeezed together. It compresses. I'm just a lucky guy that figured out, gee, maybe I should try this for the age of the universe. We look back and we see 14 billion years went by, approximately 14 billion years. That's 9 zeros. There were dinosaurs, there were cavemen, there was the sun forming, etc., etc. All those things happened. Dinosaurs disappeared 65 million years ago. They first appeared about 320, 350 million years ago. Those years went by. But how would they be perceived? The operational word here is perceived. How would they be perceived from the Bible's point of view, looking forward from the beginning? Remember, day one, because there hadn't been a second day. That means I have to take all these billions of years, which passed by, over billions of years, and run them back in time to a moment. It's a moment, not a moment in space, not a place in space. It's a moment in time, very near the beginning. We don't have time right now to get into that complication. You go to my website, you can find. I have it summarized what I have in the books. There's about a 5-page summary on it. As I take my 14 billion years and run it back, what I would have to know is how much space had stretched. And the good news is, science knows this, because Nachmanides writes that time is created at the creation. It's a great insight. Other philosophies, Aquinas says the same thing about the same time. Time was created. But that's an amazing insight in itself. But then Nachmanides makes what we call in Hebrew a diuk. He fine-tunes the timing. He says that when matter forms from this Big Bang creation, then time grabs a hold. Mishiyesh it fosbozman. That not Hazman Nivra, time is created, but time grabs hold, matter forms less than a second later. It's about 100,000th of a second later, which means if I knew how much space, and he writes, when matter forms, time grabs a hold. If I knew how much space had stretched from that moment, when matter condenses out of the energy, and that would be protons, what makes up the center of atoms. What defines what an atom is the number of protons in its nucleus. If I knew how much space had stretched from that phrase, when matter formed, time grabs a hold, grabs a hold. Today, if I knew how much space had stretched, then I would know how I could go back in time and take my 14 billion years that went by, how would they be perceived? Again, that's the operational word, perceived, from the Bible's point of view. Well, I don't know that number, but scientists know the number, astronomers know the numbers, cosmologists know the number. I'm just rounding over. It's in the order of a billion years. It's a bit less than a billion years.
Okay, wow, amazing stuff. Again, you're listening to Dr. Gerald Schroeder here on Is a Prophecy on Israel National Radio, Root Sheva, and you can email me at messiahhour@gmail.com, and the show is simulcasted as Messiah Hour on YouTube. Dr. Schroeder, we were talking about how the world has a beginning, and this show deals a lot with the possible ending of the world. And I know we spoke before the show began off air about you are one of the few people that have witnessed an atomic bomb in front of you. And this is
quite a few.
Quite a few. This is a scary time in our history, and I believe there's a concept that any weapon that's ever been made has at some point been used. So if you could talk about, perhaps from a scientific angle, especially your experiences of seeing multiple atomic bombs, you've seen a lot of them, where are we headed in the next 10, 15 years, et cetera? I know you're not a prophet, but just from a scientific perspective, if people want to ignore what's going on, I'd like you to refresh what is going on to all our listeners out there.
Okay. Just one thing. I used the wrong word in the previous section. I said million. I meant trillion.
Trillion. Okay,
I should be trillion. Okay, that's just a small point.
No problem.
It's a big number, but it's a small point.
Right. It's
where
only a
we
couple
go.
digits. It's all good.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
I mean, I wish what do I think? I think that when push will come to shove, that America will have to stand up against Iran. I don't think the Congress will allow the government of the United States to allow Iran to go where it's going, even if the President of the United States tries to block that. I think that's what's going to happen, because most of the American Congress happen to be religious. It's hard to believe it, but most are, and they believe that what's happening here is in the wrong direction. So I apologize on this point, but I can't even guess what, beyond that, what will happen. I can't see Israel unilaterally, attacking Iran from that point of view. I would rather see, there's those two ideas, how the Messiah will come, by war or by peace.
Because either way he's coming, but it is up to us as the Jewish people to follow the commandments and do teshuvah, and then that would bring the Messiah by peace, correct?
Yeah, but that's a big order also.
Right. Easier said than done.
Beg your pardon?
Easier said than done.
Yeah. And also, we would have to have peace among us. Remember, the lengths of the exiles were very different. When we messed up with God in the first temple, we got 70 years of exile. When we messed up among ourselves, we got 2,000 years of exile.
That's right.
And for the second temple, it's parenting is so educational how God runs the world. What drives you when your kids argue with you expect that they're trying to want to break free. But when you see your kids arguing among themselves, it drives the parent up the wall. If the parents want any one thing for the children, they should love each other. So when God sees us, arguing with one another, I'm more righteous than you, and you're more righteous than me, etc. That, as a parent, if it was children, I know it doesn't. It would do it to me. Well, we got 2,000 years of exile for that.
Right.
Everyone was studying Torah and everything. We had Sinat Chinam and all that kind of other stuff, and I'm better than you, and you're better than me. But I apologize being a complete failure in being able to predict what, and even make a guess, what I think.
Well, how about this? Can you tell us scientifically the atomic bomb of what the ramifications are? Obviously, we know it's disastrous, but meaning if it lands in a certain area, how far does the damage go out from where the bomb lands?
But, of course, it depends if it's an air burst or a ground burst, if it's blown up high in the air or if it's blown up on the ground, and also the extent of it. Hiroshima has been rebuilt,
Right.
But you're talking miles. We would hope that would occur somewhere else than here. The best place in the middle of the ocean as a demonstration. But I will say, literally, from this, so as not to have history rewritten, literally, in the fullest meaning of the word, thank God for Harry Truman. There's no way of seeing it any other way, but he was put there by God. He ended the war. He saved hundreds of millions of lives of both Japanese and Americans. The Japanese were not about to surrender. All the archives are there now. The Japanese weren't going to surrender.
Well, yeah. We know they're not going to surrender. So that's not why I totally agree with your argument, because the first bomb was not enough to get Japan to surrender. So that tells you they weren't going to surrender. And the Japanese people are very prideful and very strong-willed, and it really took them a lot to get them surrendered. It took 2 atomic bombs. Last question we have for you for this program. You were mentioned earlier in the show, Jews is news, and we know that statistically Jews represent somewhere around 0.2% and maybe less, because that stat was about 10 years ago. Now there's 7 billion people in the world. We know the Torah talks about the Jews being the smallest group of all the nations in the world, yet we've seen their significance. That's talked about in the Aish HaTorah Discovery Program. I want to know if you think there is a non-miraculous way to explain that, and if so, what is that?
I don't think there's a non-miraculous way. Everything is against it. Everything. I think it's exactly what Moses said. Look at the flow of social history. And what's crucial here is God predicted. The Torah predicts it explicitly, that we will be the marker in the world, for better or for worse. People should just read Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 26 and verse 27, and you get the painful story about the for better or for worse. We are the marker. The Bible predicted it. It said we would last. God promised that we would last. We can get slapped around, God forbid, but we will last. And I think if the Bible hadn't predicted it, then you might search around for one way or another to find out how this could have happened, in random ways. But the Bible, Torah predicts it explicitly, not just hints at it, explicitly says it, that we are going to be the marker in the world. And then it turns out we are. I don't know how much time you have, but China, this huge country, this is 1980. Now jump back to 1981. China goes through the Cultural Revolution. They're flat on the back technologically. It was the devastation. They needed foreign advisors. China's first foreign advisor from around the world, every scientist in the world wanted to be chosen for that job. Everyone. What country did China turn to bring the first foreign advisor following the Cultural Revolution? I mean, what would you guess? At least I'm saying it. What would you think?
Well, normally you would think the United States, but I have a funny feeling was it Israel.
Israel. It was me. I was the first foreign advisor. They told me right to my face, you're coming in under the radar. We don't recognize Israel. Realize Israel had no relations with China for another 10 years. You're under the radar here. We're going to ask you questions. Please answer them, but please don't ask any questions, especially political questions. Why would China, this gigantic country, turn to tiny, Israel? I'm not bragging. I was the first. It was a phenomenal experience. I tell you, really phenomenal. But how can it be? It doesn't make sense. It's crazy, but it happens to be true. The only thing is, how do we placate God so we can get a good handle this time around? It's good already, but it could be better. Thank God it's good already, but it could be better.
I mean, in regards to the Chinese population, I'll put this in perspective for our audience, that the Chinese population is approximately 1.5 billion. There's a plus-minus ratio in that stat of 20 million, which happens a lot of, when you have that big of a number, that's more than all the Jewish people on planet Earth.
Yeah, it's just wonderful, isn't it? I mean, it has to be. There's no way of seeing it. So I would say, if you're looking for the end of days, study the Torah, study the Tanakh, and see what you can get out of that. I haven't been able to figure. I get a lot of emails especially from evangelicals, not trying to make me into a Christian, but that's not important. But they say, read Daniel, read Ecclesiastes, read this. I can't call that stuff out. I'm not that clever to get that stuff out of the text, but. Somewhere it's hidden in there, I imagine.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
All right, we have to run, but everyone out there should. If you have not read Dr. Schroeder's books, you should read them. Genesis, the Big Bang, The Science of God, The Hidden Face of God, God According to God. Dr. Schroeder, where can people pick up those books?
Well, if they go to my website, there's a whole description of them, GeraldSchroeder.com. But otherwise, you can get them from Amazon.com. You can get them Amazon. You can get them from Steinmetzky's here in Israel, from the Pomerantz, from the Mariah bookstore in the Old City. But Amazon, or you go to my website, you just click on the books also, you get it.
And if you live in Israel, especially Jerusalem, go to Aish HaTorah. You can hear Dr. Schroeder lecture live in person, right, Doctor?
Right, and you get the book signed.
There you go. It's a good deal. All right. Dr. Schroeder, this has really been an honor and a pleasure, and it is wonderful to have you on and to have you in Israel as well, just educating everyone on this concept of both science and Torah, how they work together. We really appreciate it. We know you're a very, very busy man, so thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, that ends today's episode of Is It Prophecy here on Israel National Radio. The show is also simulcasted as Messiah Hour on YouTube, and you can email me at messiahhour@gmail.com. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and have a great day.